Breaking right now, President Joe Biden expected to announce that the U.S. and France have secured a ceasefire deal with Lebanon. Now, in Lebanon, under this agreement, a ceasefire would be implemented as early as today. To clear, this is a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in the area of Lebanon. This would end the deadliest war in Lebanon since the Lebanese Civil War ended in 1990. Now, the developments obviously happening very quickly here, so let's bring in CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata, live from the Pentagon for us. Charlie, so grateful you're here to help break this whole thing down for us. What's the latest out of the U.S. on this ceasefire deal? Did this surprise you at all?
Yeah, well, no, this is sort of the framework that we had been expecting, and we got this reportable for U.S. officials. So the Pentagon statement has always been, we continue to urge for a ceasefire. They kind of push it over to state, and what this means for Lebanon and that buffer area, and this is where it becomes critical. So part of the deal will see Israeli troops starting to draw down out of that area in southern Lebanon, and Lebanese armed forces, that LAF, moving into that area. It's going to be about a 60-day transition period. But most importantly, it will mean that Hezbollah will pull back to the Litani River, giving a 30-mile buffer zone area. And that is what's going to be critical. And if this reads, if it is going to be as we expect it to be, Israel will reserve the right to go back in there and push Hezbollah out if there are infractions, or they decide to try to regroup, or indeed try to attack from that area. So there'll be a 60-day sort of temporary ceasefire leading to a permanent ceasefire that will see Hezbollah leave that area in southern Lebanon to be taken over eventually by about 5,000 Lebanese armed forces. But that's going to take some time. That army, that military is not constituted. We've spoken to them here at the Pentagon. They've really got to bolster their defenses because it will be their responsibility to take over where Hezbollah is pulled out. So the fighting will stop immediately, but it's the withdrawal part that's going to take some time. Is that accurate? Yes, exactly. And, you say immediately, you may have seen some of these images. There has been ferocious fighting on both sides, but Israel has just been pummeling parts of southern Lebanon, parts of Beirut. And we've seen this time and again. I was there back in 2006, the last major conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, and they were just battering each other right up until the time essentially that the bell rang. As soon as the ceasefire was announced, it was out. But we've spoken to, some Israeli defense officials sort of on background who said they are specific targets. They're going after Hezbollah leadership. They took out Hezbollah leadership. They took out most of the meaningful Hezbollah leaders. They're going after the infrastructure, and they're trying to do what they can to cripple Hezbollah before that ceasefire takes hold. And Charlie, I want to get to the terms of this agreement in a second, but before that, this just coming in, we just heard from Secretary of State Antony Blinken about the ceasefire deal. He's in Italy for the G7 summit. Let's see what he had to say.
So I'm sure you're all tracking. We're in the final stages of securing a ceasefire agreement for Lebanon. We're not there yet, but I believe we are in the final stages. This has been an intensive diplomatic effort by the United States, partners like France, working with Israel, working with Lebanon over many months. And if we get to the conclusion that I hope we reach very soon, it will make a big difference. It will make a big difference in saving lives and livelihoods in Lebanon and in Israel. It will make a big difference in creating the conditions that will allow people to return to their homes safely in northern Israel and in southern Lebanon. And I also believe that by de-escalating tensions in the region, it can also help us to end the conflict in Gaza. In particular, Hamas will know that it can't count on other fronts opening up in the war. So, we're tracking this very closely, and I hope and believe that we can get this over the finish line. Now, to the business of the G7. This is my final G7 as Secretary of State, and I really want to begin by thanking all of my counterparts in the G7 who've been such remarkable colleagues and have become good friends over these 4 years. Here in Italy, I particularly want to thank my friend, the Foreign Minister, Antonio Tajani, and also Prime Minister Meloni, both for their leadership of the G7 while Italy's had the chair, but also because over the last few years, we built the strongest possible partnership between Italy and the United States.
Charlie, I want to bring you back in. We just heard from Secretary of State Antony Blinken speaking there at the G7 summit about talking about these pending ceasefire negotiations between Hezbollah and Israel. I want to go over what the terms of the ceasefire deal is and what you thought about what Secretary of State Blinken said just then.
Yeah, well, most importantly, what he said there is we have to bring an end to the fighting because of the tremendous loss of human life. There's been something like 3,000 people, according to Lebanese health officials, that have been killed since this began. Remember, Israel is fighting on two fronts, the war in Gaza and in Lebanon. But just in Lebanon alone, 3,000 people. There are tens of thousands of displaced Israelis. They've been forced to leave that area. That's important to get them back to their homes. Obviously, the people in Lebanon themselves who've just been taking a pounding. But if you'll forgive me, I've got some of the details of the deal here. So. Yeah. As I said, 60 days will be permitted for withdrawal of Israeli forces. It's a gradual withdrawal because, once again, as I said, it's going to take some time for the Lebanese forces to go in there, but it will start immediately. The first peel off of Israeli troops will be in the next 10 days. Again, that's going to be gradual. It can't be immediate because the Lebanese military really doesn't have the capacity to move in 5,000 troops into that area. And then there will be a 60 days for the total withdrawal of Israeli forces, and then a more permanent ceasefire will go into place. These things are always tentative. As I said, there's been an uptick in the fighting, to put it mildly, from both sides. Hezbollah has been firing missiles into Israel. Israel has been pounding suspected Hezbollah targets inside Lebanon. But yes, as you pointed out, this happens immediately. As soon as that ceasefire is declared, all the fighting stops and the Israeli forces start pulling back, and Lebanese forces, not Hezbollah, Lebanese forces start moving into that area of southern Lebanon.
And Charlie, we're hearing that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is going to speak any moment now. Do you have any idea of what he's going to say?
No, but he's going to speak in about another hour, is what we're told. It's always difficult. It's unpredictable to get into the mind of the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at this time. His country is at war. He had said that he wanted not to defeat Hamas, for instance, in Gaza. He wanted to destroy Hamas in Gaza. The Israeli military has been very successful in taking out high-ranking, in fact, the leader, Nasrallah, of Hezbollah itself. So I think he will want to declare some kind of victory in this. He will want to reassure his constituents in Israel that they will be safe, that this war is over, that they will no longer be threatened out of the north by Hezbollah, that its citizens can go back to their homes in villages up in the north, in northern Israel, along that Lebanese border, and there will be peace declared at least in that area. But I think he's going to come away wanting to show that he stood strong. He went after Hezbollah. These attacks started. Hezbollah started this fight on October 8th, same time as Hamas and the massacres in Israel. So this side of it, one side of that war, as they've been fighting this two-fronted war, will essentially be declared over with this ceasefire. It will be tentative. We have seen these ceasefires come and go, but it looks as if Israeli demands have been met, and that key demand, I think, as far as they're concerned, if they have an indication that Hezbollah is starting to reconstitute in that area, they hold the right to go back there and push them back.
And going back to the other side of all this, Charlie, what would this ceasefire deal mean for the war in Gaza?
Well, see, this is the knock-on effect. The Israeli forces have been fighting this conflict on two fronts, and they are not inexhaustible. And the United States has been supplying these Israelis with the weaponry needed, and that brings up other questions about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And I think if you're looking, there's a knock-on effect, right? So Iran will at least be informed of this ceasefire deal. They are the patrons of Hezbollah, so they will be involved in this. Now Israel can focus all of its attention on Gaza and ending that conflict. This can't continue to go on. The world knows it. We've seen this terrible humanitarian crisis, the tremendous loss of life. in Gaza. So I think what this will do is to serve as an accelerant to say, okay, Hezbollah is now out of the way. Now we got to focus on Gaza and figuring out how to bring an end to the fighting there. That would be my hunch.
All right, CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata, thanks so much for sticking with us, Charlie. All right, we want to get back to the Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He had this to say during the final moments of the G7 summit in Italy. Take a listen.
We also spent time discussing the opportunity and indeed the necessity to end conflicts in the Middle East and lay the foundation for a more durable peace now that Israel has achieved its strategic goals in the wake of October 7th. In Gaza, we remain committed to bringing the hostages home and ending the humanitarian crisis that Gaza's children, women, and men are facing every single day. We agreed with Arab partners that we cannot end the conflict without a plan for the post-conflict, something that we're working on intensely as we speak. We also reiterated deep concern with Iran's nuclear activities and continued failure to cooperate fully with the IAEA. One other important area of focus over these last 2 days, and that's Sudan, the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. This horrific war has produced suffering for tens of millions of people, over 20 million, forced to flee atrocities, facing famine, facing violence. I had an opportunity yesterday to visit with the World Food Program and to get an up-to-date report on the situation on the ground and what they're facing in terms of trying to deliver assistance to people in need. Now, we've made some progress over the last few weeks, particularly in terms of humanitarian access. Today, the World Food Program announced that for the first time, pretty much since the conflict has kicked off, they're getting trucks to famine-isolated areas like Zamzam, an IDP camp. With partners, we've also made progress to expand life-saving access to emergency food and medicine in other places, including the opening of the Adre border crossing and the establishment of humanitarian flights. I had a very good meeting with partners from Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt on the next steps that we all will endorse and need to take. The G7 and its partners, like these countries, are committed to expanding humanitarian access in Sudan and, at the same time, working toward ending the conflict and the suffering of the Sudanese people. We also addressed efforts to mitigate other conflicts and other humanitarian challenges around the world. We agreed on the need to continue increasing support for the multilateral security support mission in Haiti, for the contingent that's there, as well as for the Haitian National Police, and on the importance of turning this mission into a formal peacekeeping operation. We also worked to ensure effective follow-on peacekeeping forces in Somalia. Many other things were on the agenda. I just wanted to focus on those. And to conclude by saying that, from my perspective, these last 2 days, and in fact these last 4 years, are a reminder that we can navigate an increasingly complex world much more effectively when we're doing it together, when we're working with partners, with allies. The G7 has set us up for success on issues that matter to the citizens of each of our countries and that matter to people around the world. Our greatest strategic asset, our most significant force multiplier, individually and collectively, is our ability to come together and work in common cause. And from my perspective, that's never been more important. It remains essential that we keep working together to get results, to deliver for the people that we have the honor and privilege of representing. Thank you. And with that, happy to take some questions.
First question will go to Shannon Kingston from ABC.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. As you said, a 60-day ceasefire deal in Lebanon appears imminent, but in 60 days you won't be in office anymore. Do you plan to work with the incoming Trump administration to ensure that this truce can really turn into a lasting peace? And the White House has said that this deal can lead to a ceasefire in Gaza, but for almost a year it seems that nothing has moved the needle with Hamas. So what makes you think that this will convince the group to turn over the hostages it's holding?
First, yes, we're absolutely committed to working with the incoming administration on this issue and everything that we're dealing with. I had a good conversation with my successor to be, Senator Rubio, the other day. I look forward to meeting with him and to going over in detail exactly where we are and where we hope we can go, or if we haven't been able to complete the work, the next administration can go. And having that continuity and being able to hand off to the next administration the strongest possible hand to play in bringing peace and bringing security is exactly what I'm focused on. When it comes to a ceasefire, assuming we get it in Lebanon, as I said, I think this can have profound effects, not only immediately for those concerned, that is to say, people in Lebanon and Israel, who are facing a barrage of missiles and mortars and rockets every single day, saving lives, saving livelihoods, creating the conditions so that people can return to their homes in northern Israel and in southern Lebanon. 70 to 80,000 people displaced in northern Israel, an equal or even greater number displaced in southern Lebanon. But yes, in terms of Gaza itself, I also think this can have a significant impact. Why is that? Because one of the things that Hamas has sought from day one is to get others in on the fight, to create multiple fronts, to make sure that Israel was having to fight in a whole series of different places. And as long as it's thought that that was possible, that's one of the reasons it's held back from doing what's necessary to end the conflict. Now, if it sees that the cavalry is not on the way, that may incentivize it to do what it needs to do to end this conflict. Now, we have two things that are essential. One is getting the hostages back, including the 7 Americans. But we also need to make sure that in order to end the conflict, we have a clear plan for what follows the conflict that enables the people of Gaza to move forward with their lives without Hamas and with Israel having pulled out of Gaza. We spent some time here, just as we have in past weeks and months, working on that plan, and that too is something that we'll be working on intensely over the coming weeks and talking to the incoming administration about.
Julia Pompili with El Folio.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. My question is about what could be the coordinated response that you discussed today regarding the escalation of North Korean troops in Russia, since apparently this sanction policy didn't work. And the same question is about China, the Chinese support to the Russian basic industries. What could be the response of G7 in addition to condemnation? Thank you so much.
Well, I think we've seen over the last more than 2.5 years now, coordinated, effective sanctions deployed by the G7 countries, by the EU, by other countries concerned, to continue to increase the pressure on Russia and any of those who are aiding and abetting its ongoing aggression against Ukraine. That's the case, for example, with regard to Chinese entities that are supporting Russia's defense industrial base. And you've seen us, but you've also seen Europe sanction many of those entities. With regard to North Korea, we've been working together for some time to increase the pressure on North Korea, including through sanctions. But I think what's essential here is this. China has an important role to play in using its influence with the DPRK, North Korea, as well as with Russia, to cease these activities. And in the absence of that, I think one of the things you're going to see is countries in the Indo-Pacific region, and particularly on the Korean Peninsula, including the United States, including South Korea, including Japan, taking further steps to strengthen our own deterrence and defense capacities. And why is that? Because, as I mentioned before, we're deeply concerned about this two-way street. Not only what North Korea is doing for Russia in its aggression against Ukraine, but what Russia is and may do for North Korea in terms of its missile capacity, its nuclear capacity, all of which increases insecurity and instability on the Korean Peninsula, and will cause us to take further steps, building on what we've already done, to strengthen our deterrence and to strengthen our defense. And these are undoubtedly steps that, while not directed at China, China will not like. So when they are hearing not only from us, but from many countries in Europe and from many countries in Asia, the deep concerns that we all have about this relationship between Russia and North Korea, and as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, we, I think, would all look to China to use its influence to try to bring this to an end.
Christina Ruffini with one decision.
Hi, Mr. Secretary.
Evening.
Do you think the European consensus on support for Ukraine will hold if the next administration pulls back from that effort? Can it survive without the full-throated support of America and particularly the American president? And I know you've been in meetings, I don't know if you've seen the images, but the Beirut skyline is currently littered with smoke plumes from heavy Israeli bombardment. Can you confirm the U.S. was only informed of that operation after it was in progress? And I'm wondering why the U.S. hasn't been able to be more influential in guiding Israel's actions in these conflicts. At this point, does the U.S.-Israel alliance benefit Israel more than it does the United States? Thank you.
Thanks. Let me take the second part first. I'll come to Ukraine and Europe in a minute. I think what you're seeing every day, that is rockets, missiles going in both directions, only underscores how urgent it is to get the ceasefire. And it's why we've been working so intensely on bringing it to conclusion. That's the single most important thing to make an immediate difference, to stop the rockets and missiles from flying, again, in both directions. Yes, we're seeing these attacks in Beirut directed against Hezbollah, but every single day, Hezbollah has been launching projectiles into Israel, into northern Israel, as it's done virtually every day since October 7th, which is how this problem started. Again, I'm not going to speak to that. We've been focused on trying to see that this ceasefire agreement gets over the line and gets implemented. That's what's going to make the biggest difference. Look, we've been very clear also from day one that for the United States, we have a number of objectives in the Middle East. One is to make sure that we do everything we can to support Israel in its efforts to make sure that October 7th never happens again. Second, to do everything we can to make sure that the conflict doesn't spread. We don't have more open fronts, more open conflicts, which will simply endanger more lives and more livelihoods and create more suffering. And we've had some significant success in actually doing that, despite many, many challenges and many moments when this easily could have escalated into a regional war. And third has been to do everything we possibly can to help people who are caught in the middle of this horrific crossfire. Crossfire instigated by Hamas on October 7th. And that goes to the work that we've done on getting more humanitarian assistance more effectively to people who need it, to trying to get better protections for civilians who are caught in this. And while we absolutely must see more done on that front, it's also fair to say that what we've seen to date would not have happened without U.S. engagement, without U.S. determination. So we're intensely focused on this. We will be till the last day of this administration. On Ukraine and on Europe, look, what I continue to hear, I came from NATO meetings not so long ago, a few weeks ago, G20 meetings, and particularly here at the G7, is enduring European support for Ukraine. I also believe that's reflected in my country because we have a bipartisan majority in both houses of Congress who supported the supplemental budget appropriation for Ukraine. You see support on a bipartisan basis among the public for continuing to support Ukraine. But this has always been not just us, not just about us, not even just about Europe. This has been, in many ways, a global effort. We have more than 50 countries who have been supporting Ukraine. And I believe, based on everything I'm hearing, we'll continue to do that. And what we're determined to do in the remainder of this administration is to do everything possible to ensure that Ukraine has what it needs to be able, as I said, to fight through 2025 if necessary, or if there's a negotiation, to be able to negotiate from a position of strength. And much of what we're doing now, working in
And you are watching Secretary of State Antony Blinken speaking there at the G7 summit in Italy, addressing the potential ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hezbollah on the top of his announcement there. And then he's also speaking about other conflicts happening all over the globe. This is Secretary of State Blinken's last G7 summit of this administration.